Thank you all for coming. I think we have more public this meeting, LPC 2. As you know, this is an incredibly exciting time for the village, and we sincerely appreciate all the volunteers, local community members who have agreed to serve on our local planning committee, which will be developing the strategic investment plan over about 6 meetings. So we have to hit the ground running. And we're a pretty congenial group here. And I think it's easier for us to see each other than it was upstairs when we were in a line. So we're not gonna worry about designating you. If you wanna jump in, LPC people, just do so we can keep the conversation moving. To members of the public, near the end of this 2-hour meeting, our consultants, and we're so privileged to have not only the Department of State assisting us in this process, but our own very own LaBerge consultants who will help coordinate. They will ask for public comment at near the end of the meeting, and that would be the opportunity for any of the public to ask any questions they might have. Is that it? Oh, and the only other thing is, if you haven't already, fill out the recusal form and they'll kind of keep it on file. We understand at this point, we don't really know what the projects might be, so there's nothing to recuse from, but as long as they've got your John Hancock on that, it will be on file, and as things come up, then it would be your opportunity to ask to be recused from something and to complete the form. There we go.
Thank you. And are we recording? We are. All right, excellent. Thank you. So my name again, Nicole Allen, LaBerge Group, and so we do have a very robust agenda to get through today, and we want to make this as interactive as we can with the committee as we move through a lot of this material. So very quickly, we're going to run through the public engagement plan, review that with you so that you have an understanding of what we're doing moving forward. We're going to run through public workshop number 1, which is coming up very shortly. We're going to talk about the open call for projects. We're going to review the community profile, very preliminary, very high level, so that we have an idea to build off of our discussion today with a focus on envisioning. And that'll be the visioning exercise that follows. So as you're going through the community profile, keep that in the back of your head as far as some visioning ideas. We'll really need your input built in. And then we'll go through some next steps and then open it up for public comment. All right, so here we are, timeline again. We are on, as we mentioned, a very aggressive timeline as we move through this. And so we're already into June. It's hard to believe a month went by already, or at least a few weeks. So we're at our LPC number 2. We are talking about the downtown profile assessment. We're diving into the information, so we have a very high level at this point. And at the next step, we're going to be building up the project profiles and the visioning part of the process. So all of that's initiating now, and then the public part of the process is happening in July moving forward. It's going to be very engaging. We'll talk about the timelines of the key events. We're kind of keeping that in mind when we look at the timeline. We're already kind of in month 2 already, and quickly kind of moving through this New York Forward process as we keep moving together. So our public engagement plan. So this is a very important part of our process, as we want to make sure that we are inclusive in the community and being able to reach a large population and be able to bring in ideas. It's an important part of the process to make sure that the vision and the strategies that are being developed match the projects that are being presented. So all of that are different tools, so that as the committee is presented those projects and presented with the strategic investment plan, you're able to weigh all of that input in a variety of sources. And so that's a key part of this engagement plan, to make sure that we've kind of thought through a lot of different opportunities to be able to engage the public in kind of just multitude of events.
And that's in your packet. You all have a draft of that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so that will outline a little bit of an explanation of what those events are, what they would look like, and the dates that are included. We'll make sure that all of that's kind of on the high level side. But as part of that engagement plan, we have the local planning committee. As I mentioned, you are the eyes and ears of the community. So you're listening, you're talking, you're engaging as well. You're bringing that information back to us. So that's one engagement tool. We have the project identification. So that's with direct project sponsors. Those can be a variety of different entities that come forward as part of those project sponsors. They're bringing ideas to us in the committee as well. And then we have our public workshops. So there's 2 public workshops that will be in this process. We have our visioning and goals first part of the public workshop, and then later it'll be on the proposed projects. So the first part of the public engagement will really focus on making sure that we are robustly, having those ideas presented, talking about the vision of our study area for Brucetown and being able to make sure that it widely reflects the goals that we have been talking about in our first 2 LPC meetings that we move forward to. And then we have engaging hard-to-reach populations. So making sure that we're not just doing a one-stop and being able to say that we've engaged. We're really trying to make sure that we have another opportunity to dive into some of those opportunities to talk with other individuals. And those are going to be, tend to be a variety of individuals. It might be those that are working long hours. They may be the lower income individuals. So there's a lot of different individuals that we want to make sure that we're targeting as part of this process so that they all have a voice as part of this planning process. So the engagement plan talks a little bit about those details and how we are able to extract information from a range of demographics within the community. Stakeholder meetings, I believe everyone's been asked to start brainstorming stakeholders already. I think Adriana hit you up in an email. So part of that is looking at trying to identify who we should be talking to and having some more focused conversations with so that we're able to really understand some of, it's a different perspective. It's not necessarily that they're going to provide all the answers, it's just making sure that we have kind of a range of opportunities to be able to hear different viewpoints, and that's largely going to be able to provide. It might be the school district, it might be, so they understand what the needs of the community are from a different perspective. Sometimes it's your religious organizations. Those are examples of key stakeholders that hear a larger demographic and some of the needs that constituents might have as part of the planning process. Then we have our online engagement. There's a public survey that will be part of the process. We have the New York Forward website. It is in the process of being updated. We recognize that there is some information that is not yet up, but it is there with the webmaster. He's just working to get all the links working. We'll make sure that he has today's meeting tomorrow, and so hopefully we get all those links very active very quickly.
You're referring to the Village of Cooperstown New York Forward website?
Yes.
Yes. So the information on the first meeting and everything that we're sort of getting today is on the village website. That's cooperstownny.org, and you'll see a New York Forward drop down.
So this is a very busy slide here, so as I'm walking through it. We also have Facebook posts, so we'll be working with the village to make sure that information is flowing through the Facebook, e-blasts, and press releases. There's a multitude of ways that we want to make sure that information is flowing from us, from the committee to the community. And so that's going to be a key part of making sure we have different dialogues. Some of it might be by paper, some of it might be through your own contacts and being able to share the electronic information. So once you have some of the flyers and the survey information, we definitely want to make sure that you're reaching out to those that you know as well, back to the eyes and ears of the community to help engage with us.
Those are also included in your packet. You have a couple of flyers for each activity we're going to talk about today. So if you want to put them up in your locations, you can, and I even have extras if you want more than 3 each.
And then we'll have a pop-up event as well at the farmers market on Tuesday the 18th. And so that'll be just another opportunity to engage locally, to be able to share some ideas and have people answer the survey and talk a little bit about the planning process to get some ideas.
And is that the final date? Because in the packet it says the 29th.
I believe it is the 29th and not the 18th, now that you say that. As I think
Oh, that got changed at the last minute, I apologize.
Yeah.
And I believe
Thank you for catching
that
that.
was the 20th.
It's the Tuesday,
It's
Saturday,
now.
Saturday the 29th,
So
yes.
this is our, so the 29th, right?
So there are a couple of things. we
It
wanted
is
to-
Saturday's farmer's
Yeah,
market.
so
Saturday's farmer's
Saturday's farmer's market, and
That
then
says what?
the flyer has the wrong date for the open call release.
I'm just looking at the farmer's market schedule, it's not on the farmer's market,
It is not there yet.
because we don't have it. I'm sorry, we don't have it.
Oh, no, we just picked this date.
I'm just saying that the farmer's market is in space.
Oh, okay,
That's what I'm saying, we need to be contacted for that,
okay,
to schedule.
we'll come back to that then.
Okay,
All right,
we'd love to have it. We
Thank
just don't have the table right now.
It is right, and Ryan is right. It is
Yeah.
right. It's a public meeting.
The pop-up date's not on any of the flyers.
Right.
So, brought to our attention that at this moment, there may not be table space, but we can, look at opportunities.
Contact us with some.
Yeah, we'll figure something out for that event. Okay. So that is a snapshot of the public engagement plan. We'll definitely, there's questions related to it, now would be the time.
So I see e-blast up there, where is that list coming from?
That would come from the village, I think.
I mean, like the list that gets our calendar, et cetera.
Right, yeah, exactly. Any kind of email list that you might have, we can funnel this information through.
I haven't seen it on the Villages New York Forward website, but if there's is there a link already to, if I want to be on a mailing list and here's my email?
If it's not there, we'll have them add that.
Okay.
Is there are there PDFs of these flyers?
Yeah, so as a follow-up, I'm going to send you all digital versions, and then I'm working to get the flyers themselves up on the website. Not really in downloadable form, but more just, the information is all there.
Any other questions on the general plan?
No, I would add that, once we get the digital versions of these, I would encourage the planning committee members to share those with anybody in their email lists. So Chamber of Commerce is represented, Bassett has a huge footprint. I could certainly share them around the whole thing employees, but I think just to push this out there during a very busy time of year, so if I could lean on all of you to share that electronically or in print version with, with your contacts as you go about your daily business. The more projects we have, the better.
It definitely creates a nice list of projects, whether they're implemented through the New York Forward funding process or partners with the village in the future. So as part of the public engagement plan, it is a living, breathing document essentially. So as we move through the process, if we identify additional tools and we want to incorporate them, we can add to it. If we want to have more LPC meetings, if you want to have subcommittees, those are part of the process that can be built into it and be able to add opportunities to kind of create additional engagement along the way. There are groups that, as we identify stakeholders, if we're finding that we're just not getting all the voices, we want to make sure that we can always add those into the planning process too. Any other kind of broad ideas that we might have at this moment?
If anything occurs to you, you can always feel free to email me. Sorry, Jeff.
That's right. We talked a little bit about it in the last meeting. There's a fundraising day based in Utica called Mohawk Valley Gives, and one of the things that nonprofits did for fundraising was develop QR codes that were like on coasters in bars and like on tables of restaurants, and they became kind of, the coasters at least became kind of takeaway items, but that's a really good awareness. And you talk about maybe people who wouldn't get reached, QR codes with coasters at Cooley's, at Doubleday, will reach a lot of people who normally wouldn't be having this on their radar. So I'm not sure what that entails and what the cost is, but it's a quick way to get to a lot of people.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely incorporate the QR codes throughout our materials and see if there's other places or opportunities to put it too. All right, So this takes us to workshop number 1. So as I mentioned, this is a visioning workshop. This is intended to bring in the public to hear their ideas of what they view the study area to be, building off of what the application said and kind of informing them about the process. So it's informative, it's an education process. So we'll be soliciting ideas. We have it set from 12 to 8 on July 11th. It's going to be at Cooperstown High School in the cafeteria. We were able to move it, so I think it'll be a very nice space to be able to accommodate public during this event. We'll have a number of stations.
The flyer in this image does not have the correct, it says gymnasium, but your flyers say cafeteria.
That was a
Covering
change
bases.
as of this
As of this morning. Thank you, Sarah, for connecting us.
Not a problem.
Yeah, so there'll be a number of stations, and so as part of the process, we've talked about having the committee there as well to help answer questions and work with kind of in small groups as dialogues and make themselves available. One of the stations will be about the New York Forward process. There'll be a slideshow that's on a loop, so it'll be informative, talk about what it was, what the projects kind of can be, how the projects are selected, kind of just a very general, high level about what New York Forward is and how kind of the opportunities for additional input from the public's perspective. There'll be a places and spaces map. This will be a station where you'll have the study area, and we'll be able to have the public engage through stickers and notes, being able to provide comments specifically about things that from a visioning perspective should be thought about within the community. So we'll get a lot of feedback on this interactive mapping process. Assets and challenges will be just that. There'll be a station where we can provide stickers and comments on strengths and weaknesses about some of the assets and challenges within the village, within the study area, so that we're able to look at those from strengths and kind of what can we build off of, and then challenges, what do we need to overcome, but those would all be folded into our visioning part of the process, and so it's intended to really gather a lot of input as part of this. And then there'll be the goals and vision. So we're starting to talk that conversation tonight from the LPC's perspective of goals and vision, and then building upon it with the public, what the public views as the goals and vision. And so all of this gets pulled together kind of as part of the planning process. Another station will be on open call, Q&A, being able to answer questions very generically, not intended to get into the details of a project. We'll have opportunities for that. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this would be really just helping them understand what open call for projects is as part of this process. And then the last station is the survey. So it'll be a lot of different opportunities to engage through kind of throughout this meeting. You can float around, you can do them in any order you want. It's not necessarily set to be stuck in any point. There may be stations that you spend more time on and other stations that have less, but that's the idea of being able to give the individuals the opportunity to participate as they feel comfortable, but also an opportunity to talk with the consultants that are there. The state will be there, and being able to kind of have these conversations to understand what the process is.
Can I just ask a logistic question?
Yes.
I know you've connected with Matt, who will help facilitate everything. Please let him know what type of setup you want, because otherwise the cafeteria is just as it sounds, a cafeteria with a lot of cafeteria tables. So if we need to move those, they're easy to move, and
Okay.
just try to connect with him.
Okay.
Oh, and let him know if you need technology.
Yes. I believe we have already shared that
Perfect.
with
Yeah,
them,
on that form.
but I don't think we've given a table layout or
Okay,
lack thereof layout.
gotcha.
Table removal plan.
Any questions on workshop number 1? So mark your calendars, July 11th is coming.
Put your flyers out, let people know. There will be an opportunity for the general public and then also for anybody who may or may not want to put forth a project. So definitely a wide audience.
Sure. Just one clarification, so the boards will go up online, right, after the event? So people can see.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yep. It'll be very visible, very, very transparent, the results of the meeting too. All right, so then we get into our open call for projects. So that begins today, officially, and it's gonna go until August 2nd. So open call for projects is a fair time frame, intended to be a fair time frame, so everybody has the same length of time to be able to complete their open call or their project call. The forms are available on the village's website.
You all have it in your packet?
I'll have it in your packet. They can be completed and mailed to Adriana. She has her email up there. It'll be shared, but it's on all the forms as well. We will have the Q&A on July 11th. And we will have virtual office hours. So if there is anyone that has a project that they want to discuss with us, we will make time to be able to walk through them. Virtually, we'll have a meeting. We'll be able to see what their concept plan is, their ideas are, talk about the budget, talk about whatever pieces of information that they have or are missing to really help guide them towards filling in the gaps and being able to make a competitive application. We have presented times that they don't work for any individual. We're making ourselves available. We just need them to reach out and be able to set something up with us as well. What isn't in your public engagement plan, and which shows you how living and breathing it is we have added a webinar that we're going to do. So we will do a webinar. We'll set up, we'll reach out to be able to present kind of like what is the open call for projects, and people can attend and get more information about the form, how to fill it out, what's required of it, and kind of help guide those that are looking to make an application through this process. So that we will develop and set up. We just don't have a date yet. So we just discussed that today. The Department of State said something that we're going to run during this time period. So just kind of keep on the lookout for that. And then as a reminder, the village also has to submit a project application form for any of their projects that they want to have considered, so it's all part of the planning process.
Just one quick suggestion is, if there are any project sponsors who want to know what the filled out version of the project form looks like, you can look at all of the strategic investment plans from rounds 1 through 5 on the Department of State website. And when you look at the project profile, it shows each, kind of item here, and it shows what it looks like when it's filled out. And it will show you the kind of information that you need as well.
Which is a great idea too, if you're looking for putting in a specific type of project, a housing project, and you're looking for the type of information that was previously presented. That's an opportunity to kind of mimic some of the details that might have been previously prepared as well. So you don't have to start from scratch too. There's a wide variety of projects that have been developed as part of the first 5 rounds. Any questions on the open call for projects?
No, I'm not quite sure if it's appropriate, and I don't want to deviate from this project and this exercise, but also this is running concurrently to the CFA, the open project. So if there's a way that we can help.
We already brought that up, and, because it was gonna end about the same time as the CFA, so this is a week later. Certainly for the village is the only one I think that would impact, because I think we're doing 4 or 5 CFAs this year. But at least our projects are already kind of in the application, so we can pull pretty quickly. We didn't feel we were reinventing the wheel there. But if it could go a week later, even into August, that would be fabulous. They already did shift it.
I will tell you, as one of the CFA writers, this is almost impossible.
So the challenge that you have to be mindful, it's up to the consultant team as to how they want to proceed, but the work backwards, the deadline for this program is December 15th. So it'll be a discussion for the LPC if they want to move it back, but also from the consultant team side, the deadline is usually the deadline. So,
right. Some of it's almost a ripple effect of challenges when we start shifting the dates. Not to say it can't be done, but if we think about our LPC number 3, I believe we are scheduled for late August.
August 23rd.
And that's where we're going to start discussing the projects. And so we need to be able to have enough time to get the projects, do analysis, and be able to turn it around into something that you can also digest as well. So only giving us like 2 weeks to kind of work with these projects in order to be able to pull all that information in as well. So it's one of those where if we want to extend the date, we need to think about that next date as well and how it does shift some things.
And that's actually not where I was coming from. It was just another opportunity to share with private sponsors who might find an alternate funding source. So like encouraging people to apply for CFAs, because they're going through this process anyway. Here's another round of funding. And then the regional council, and with Ken and I, we see projects coming through, we're writing a plan at the regional level. We can sort of be supportive and saying, either at the regional council level, this is part of Leader Forward. I mean, there's just some synergy, I think, that we can, as a group, help with the region
That's a
forward.
great observation, and that would definitely be part of our discussions with any of the applicants that do come in, just to be able to show them that there are those other funding sources and they're not limited to this.
And we can leverage both. I mean, just from a consistency.
Right,
So I
yeah.
just wanted
And
to-
whether they are able to make an application this year or if it's next year, they at least are aware of the opportunity.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so thank you. So a little bit on open call, so it is available on the village's website. You can download the project form, you can review the eligibility criteria that's there, and there's some project requirements. There are the office hours on the website to be able to select. If you want to go right in, you can make a reservation. There's an appointment, set up a Zoom link automatically, so those are all set up so that individuals can pick those dates. If they don't work, we will pick other dates. We fill out the project proposal submission, and then you're able to submit your complete application. So you can have it done online, you can email it, or have a hard copy, ride it to the village, and we'll be able to get all those. So anything that is a hard copy, as long as it has the August 2nd date on it as received, that's gonna be kind of our cutoff point. So if it is delivered August 2nd in paper form, it's accepted.
Or postmarked by August.
Postmark, yeah, postmark or received,
Yeah.
anyway. So that way it is very, right, stamped received. Open call FAQ, so there is an FAQ that will be on the village, that is on the village's website as well.
We'll be building it out as we get more questions.
Right, so as there are questions that might be similar in nature, we want to make sure that we provide those answers for everyone to be able to have that. That's kind of the idea that it'll kind of grow, so that people don't have to ask the same question, they'll be able to have those answers. But eligible project types, we talked a little bit about it at the last meeting. Public improvement projects, branding and marketing downtown, new development, rehab, downtown buildings, and then facade enhancements or small building renovations. So those are kind of the key areas. The New York Forward projects must be located within the project boundary. There are times where there might be something that is presented that's outside the boundary, and that would be something that the committee would have to take a very hard look at to see if it fits with everything that we talked about today, to see if it requires an adjustment of the boundary. But for the most part, we're talking about it has to be within that boundary at this moment. They have to be able to break ground within 2 years of receiving funding, so that's a key piece, and have diverse financing in place. This is a reimbursement program as well, so making sure that they have the funding to be able to move it forward, break ground, and be able to finance the project as part of this process. And as part of it, it also has to be a public, nonprofit, or a private entity. It can be a single owner. So those are kind of the recap notes from the last meeting as well. So those will all be put on the website so that those that are seeking to do a project will also have that information.
Just to add one more, the project must have site control to
They do, right, so they do need to have site control.
which is you could
Or
always-
legal authority to undertake the project.
Right, yes, the legal authority part, but, or be able to demonstrate they have that ability in some way.
And it can be that they have a path to acquiring site control, so for example, if you are in the process of closing, if you're a week from closing as of August 2nd, or 2 weeks away from closing, that'd be fine, but then you do close. So that's important, and as we get to the review time frame, we help get that ironed out. But maybe some of it a little bit, but not much.
Any questions on that aspect? I know we're moving very quickly with a lot of information. We're gonna hold
on to your hats.
Hold on to your hats, go for a ride.
I have a question about just the project.
Yep.
There's a lot of good information in here. I didn't see scanning it quickly anywhere that these are reimbursement grants.
So that should be added to the FAQ if it's not apparent. We want to make sure that.
I don't know if this document is like set in stone, but I would think it'd be a good thing to put in there. Because if I got this packet, there's a lot of rules in here, that's not one of them.
Okay.
So I think it'd be important to include that, just so we don't get, if people are thinking they're gonna get this money before they start the project, you know, like you need to have capital financing in order to complete the project, and it's reimbursable. The other thing that I didn't notice in here that we discussed at the last meeting was MWBE requirements, which in some cases may affect project budget. So I think that should also be clearly stated. If it's 30% like it is with most of the CFA grants, like I think that should be in here, so that people know that as they're planning the project, because it could involve multiple contractors or finding one MWBE contractor. I just think those are two things with funding that I know we see a lot of questions with, you know, through the CFA process.
Good point.
Is there also a timeline for reimbursement from project completion?
It's hard to say, it varies by agency. So, for example, HCR, you know, has been known to go in this month, you know, as quickly as a month. ESDs somewhere around that same time, and for DOS, it really depends on the scope of the project. One thing, a couple of suggestions that I had, which is, now that it comes to it, is you should include a link to ESD's list of MWBE contractors.
Okay.
And that's very deep in their website, you won't know to find it unless you go and look there. And then the other piece is to have some FAQs about MWBE, because if you have like federal procurement vehicles, like, you know, what's it called? What it's called? That's like DBE or something like that.
Disadvantaged business enterprise?
Yeah, disadvantaged business enterprise requirements, usually attached to federal funding, and that supersedes MWBE. But that's also relevant for, you know, if the village has any federal funding for their projects, or if, you know, other people have federal grants and capacity that has those DBE requirements.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with the downtown profile. This is just an overview. We're joined today by Todd Poole with Forward Planning. So he's helping us with the market analysis and socioeconomic look. So the downtown profile, it will identify the strengths, challenges, and the potential for revitalization. It's a concise summary. It's an existing conditions look at what are we dealing with. And it really helps us get kind of an overview of the area and where targeted improvements might have kind of a catalytic, you know, impact. And that helps us to be able to, you know, once we start looking at the projects and evaluating them, it helps us to understand kind of where they might fall in terms of where the village is at right now and where we want the village to be, right, as part of that visioning process that we're also undertaking right now. So this graphic was at the LPC 1 presentation, and so I'm just highlighting here that we are on that first arrow, and this downtown profile and assessment again feeds into this visioning goals, strategies, as we're doing this public outreach and calling for projects. And so we're really this is an immense amount of information gathering that we're undergoing right now. So the New York Forward application that the village submitted contained a pretty robust list of a lot of prior investments that are within or adjacent to the study area. And so you're looking at streetscape improvements for Main Street, EV charging station, other pedestrian improvements, Village Hall improvements, Doubleday Field, that major improvement, wastewater treatment plant, Main Street flagpole, the lakefront park viewing platform, Pioneer Park renovations, Wi-Fi hotspots, Willowbrook right sizing the culvert, the Cooperstown Distillery expansion, some stormwater improvement plannings for Hoffman Lane and Pioneer Alley, Pioneer Street improvements, and the trolley and gateway improvements that happened back in 2014, so they're a little bit further out. But I mean, this really sets the stage to show that there's been a lot building in the study area to support future investments, both private and public investments. And these slides have some pictures of those investments. Another element to this downtown profile is to look at the prior plans that may be salient to the study area. So we will be summarizing the outcomes of the 2016 downtown revitalization strategy, that's your comprehensive plan. The Otsego County Coordinated Transportation Plan, the Otsego County Strategic Prioritization Plan, and the Mohawk Valley REDC perspectives and their progress reports. So these are all kind of the regional and local framework and the inertia that might be building and things that the village can then capitalize on. So starting with environmental features, so this map is showing the study area. The black squiggly lines are 2-foot contours. The Willowbrook, as you can see, comes through the village. It's culverted under Doubleday Field, and then it kind of comes back up just outside of it, and you can see where the topography actually kind of gets really deep right outside of Doubleday near Pioneer Alley. There is a 100-year floodplain associated with Otsego Lake. That's that green shaded pattern, so you can see a good chunk of Lakefront Park is within that. So that's important to just keep in mind as we plan for the future of Lakefront Park, the different activities and infrastructure that can go there. We want to make sure that that's cognizant of the impacts to that floodplain. There are some DEC wetlands, it seems, associated with the shallows of Otsego Lake, and so there's a 100-foot regulatory buffer associated with that, so any disturbances within that 100-foot buffer, would require DEC permitting. And so that's, when we look at environmental features, particularly for economic development, we're really looking at what are the environmental constraints to future development. And the reality is that the New York Forward planning area is pretty developed already. There's really not too many, environmental constraints that would preclude you from developing. There's mild topography. Really, the wetlands are really not anywhere you're going to put a building. And you have the existing development footprint anyway that is going to reduce the disturbances to what we call green fields or natural areas. Like you said, the Lakefront Park floodplain necessitates that flood-proofing improvements if those improvements do exist. And there's also an opportunity, as I think we're all aware, for lake stewardship and education in the high visibility area that is Main Street. So that Hoffman Lane project really takes that into account. But even just the installation of green stormwater infrastructure on Main Street, you've already got some really interesting, cool signage and ways to kind of draw people's attention to, even though we're in this built up landscape, there is this natural landscape right here, and this is how the village is choosing to steward it. When you look at the street network, there are a couple major ways to get into this downtown area. You have Main Street, which becomes County Route 31. We have Chestnut Street, which runs roughly north-south. And then Glen Avenue runs roughly east-west. So in terms of how people funnel into the village, how they get there, those are the major roads. Other than Main Street, I think most other roadways in this study area are maintained by the village. So that's another element that we should keep in mind as we think about what these projects will entail. So another really interesting asset this village has is the trolley route. So the red trolley stop park and ride is just outside of the study area up the hill. There are trolley stops, as you can see, identified throughout on this map. And the trolley route circulates almost on a regional level compared to what the study area is. So that trolley is really kind of passing through the study area. I believe it's every 30 minutes. A really interesting thing that I came away with is that it's free to park and it's $2.50 per day per adult to ride. And it's $2.50 per hour to park. So I thought that was a really stark point. And especially driving around the village during your busy times, I certainly see the allure of that. The mayor was able to get me ridership data, which I thought was really fascinating. The 2016 represents a ridership peak. Obviously in 2020, it had to shut down service. It performed under reduced service in 2021, and we're seeing ridership coming back up in 2022, and then the trend is also to be increasing in 2023. And I was wondering if anybody had any insight around that peak. Like, is there anything you can think of that has contributed to that peak, or why it may have declined even pre-pandemic?
You mean in 2017 and 18?
Yeah.
Who was inducted?
Who was inducted?
Who was inducted?
They're mostly
Probably
tourists
not.
who use those, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It's a seasonal
It's
problem.
Got it. Okay.
It's not
That was my
Cool.
understanding.
All right.
There was also
It was 19.
problems with the service provider that they had perhaps overextended themselves and were devoting as much attention to it.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
In also in 2013, street paid parking started, which might have resulted in, one of the designs of it was to push people to go to the trolley.
Uh-huh.
So I wouldn't say that's a direct impact because it faded off as paid parking. Plus, I don't know all of it, how that tracks.
Right.
This trend. It does not track this trend.
Oh, it doesn't? Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
No, I mean, our overall attendance does not track that trend line.
The overall.
I mean, other than the recent trend line.
Right.
The COVID trend line, yes.
2022 is pretty predictable. Okay. Gotcha. So a major element of this village, this study area specifically, is its pedestrian network. A lot of work has gone into the pedestrian infrastructure in the past couple of years, as you can see from the prior slides. We have, there are a number of crosswalks, particularly east of Chestnut Street, to facilitate movement from Doubleday Field and from the Baseball Hall of Fame and across those intersections. There's a signalized crosswalk at Chestnut Street and Main Street, so we've highlighted that as well. Of course, we have the trolley stops, and I think it was just interesting to overlay those so that we can look at where that crosswalk and pedestrian infrastructure is and where the trolley is stopping and where there may be some gaps in that, that mile marker point. So you can see there may be a gap around Railroad Ave, around Lake Street, and so forth. And then sidewalks, I mean, the study area is very well equipped with sidewalks. I did note that coming west along Main Street, the sidewalks go, they get a little bit less wide, but that's also where your land use pattern becomes more residential conversion, and the county offices are, so you're not handling as many, retail-oriented pedestrians. So those are the takeaways basically are reiterated, but some interesting insights. There are some missing connections as tight as well invested as the pedestrian infrastructure is. I think because there's such a accommodating pedestrian infrastructure, it's obvious when that infrastructure is maybe missing. So, from Main Street to Pioneer Alley is basically a driveway, but there is access to a place that people like to get to. And I think that, because Doubleday Field is also the municipal parking area, there's really only one way to get back to that area, and that is to walk, if you are a member of the public or a patron of one of those establishments. If you own a business back there, you need to get your service vehicles back there. If you own a business and that's your backyard, that's where you want to put your dumpsters and your utilities and those types of things. But if you own a business and that's your front yard, you want that to be your front yard and you want it to be welcoming. So there are certainly some areas, Main Street to Pioneer itself, and even Hoffman Lane, you have a very narrow right of way, but you do have pedestrian traffic and you have this kind of through traffic use conflict that I think is interesting and maybe warrants a deeper dive. So in summary with transportation, you have a regional and county transportation network that is largely based on vehicular travel. And within the Newark Forward area and the village, I think, encouraging the use of the trolley and its connectivity, I think particularly from the red lot, if Railroad Avenue and that kind of light manufacturing area is to be elevated, drawing a connection to that area for pedestrians who can walk that distance and connect from that park and ride down the hill, I think is a real opportunity. And then building off the prior work of pedestrian improvements, closing those gaps, and connecting or maybe even creating some pedestrian-only areas or no through traffic type areas where the right of way is narrow and pedestrians really should have the right of way. So moving from kind of transportation, we look at land use to understand the breakdown of how buildings are used, but it also can identify the typologies of your buildings as well. So we're looking at the red buildings are commercial buildings, the blue buildings are community service, the dark green is conservation or public park. We have some recreation land, which is like Doubleday Field and a couple of private clubs. Vacant land is actually in this study area really not legitimately vacant. And so we're using, to populate these colors, we're using county tax assessment code data. And so it really depends on how the county kind of lumps in their assessment data. So it's always important for us to look at the land use maps and make sure that we're looking at them from a critical perspective. So, the parcel just south of the Baseball Hall of Fame, that's in trust. That's part of the Baseball Hall of Fame. I don't know that that represents development potential necessarily. And so while there may be a building on it, it's not really functionally vacant, right? The same thing with the parcel all the way to the west. We have there's a medical building that was, I believe, used by Bassett. That parcel to the north seems to also have some of the infrastructure associated with that building on it. So again, it might not have a building on it, but it also may not be functionally vacant. The only thing is there's a parking lot right next to Doubleday Field. It is a commercial enterprise, but the village may consider that, or the committee may consider that quote unquote underutilized. Maybe that's not the ideal place for parking, maybe it is, but when we look at land use, we want to look at it from the perspective of, who are we and what is the use of it?
We weren't talking about followed law, we were talking about.
No, we're talking right this
the
side here,
commercial, yeah,
right
okay.
next to,
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
So within the study area, there are 125 tax parcels. That's what we're basing our calculations off of, is the number of tax parcels and not the acreage or area. Because if you can tell from these maps, a lot of these parcels are actually cut off by the Newark Forward boundary line. So we don't want to cut off people's, acreages that are in their deeds. Of the 62% of commercial property in the study area, the majority of that commercial, or 58%, is row type, so that looks like your main street, the heart of your main street. Those are either attached or detached, but row type really means mixed use. It means retail commercial, maybe some office commercial, and apartments. The next highest share of your commercial is actually residential conversion, which I thought was interesting. So going up Chestnut, or continuing past Chestnut up Main Street, you see a lot of these kind of converted residences, like the building that you're seeing at the bottom of the page. And then again, we talked about vacant uses, so we want to be kind of careful about how we represent those parcels. This is a quick zoning map. The majority of the study area is in the business zoning district. The next proportion is within the R3 residential core zoning district. About 19% is within the commercial zoning district. You have a little bit of riparian protection where Lakefront Park is, and there's a waterfront overlay there as well. What does that mean? This is a lot of text, but to really distill it, understanding how the village's zoning works helps us understand what potential barriers or procedures potential applicants might have to go through, and whether those are facilitating economic development or making it difficult to facilitate economic development. So in this village, there is a planned development district, which I understand several parcels have taken advantage of. That's a village board zoning amendment, so there's a procedure outlined in the code for how you go through that. There are baselines laid out for density in there, and the village board can find that it's appropriate to deviate from those baselines if the applicant has made a good faith effort to do so and just can't fit that on their parcel. Site plan review is done by the planning board for non-residential multifamily uses unless new development is within the waterfront development overlay, and then any development within the waterfront development overlay or with 100 feet of wetland or steep slope does have to go for site plan review. Special use permits are approved or reviewed by the village board. And part of that review process is that the village board sends out the application for recommendations to other boards. So, Mayor, the way that I understand it is that it would go out to the planning board or the HARB or the zoning board for their recommendation before the village board acts on it.
We prefer to have the recommendations, yes.
And if you don't, is there there's a timeline involved there?
Yeah.
For
If
receiving
we
them?
ask that it come back, it be addressed at the next meeting, so it's like a 30-day.
Okay, and then if they don't respond, if you don't receive those recommendations, do you typically?
We've never had that.
Wow.
Always prompt.
Oh, good. Well, great. And then the Historic and Architectural Review Board only applies to areas of the village that are under historic district, which is the whole.
The entire village.
Yeah, which is the entire village, yeah. I was making a joke. So a certificate of appropriateness needs to be provided to almost anything that happens outside of the building. Exterior alterations, and so forth. This is a typical process for a community with as much historic, as many historic buildings and landscapes as this village has. And so I guess one question I had, and we don't have to talk about it right this moment, but always curious about the people who are involved in these review processes. If there are hitches or things in the process that could go better or be more efficient, we definitely certainly want to have that captured. And then just quickly building off of the historic district, so the study area is kind of interesting. A big chunk of it's actually in two historic districts, the Glimmerglass and the Cooperstown Historic District. So the area that's in yellow is actually in this larger district up here. And then this little this little guy is part of the Glimmer Glass District, which is this big green box there. And most of the buildings within the study area would be considered to contribute to a historically significant landscape, and that's why HARB review is required. So are there any thoughts or feedback on that section of the community profile?
Just got one.
Yeah.
I think that it's important to discuss the zoning, land use, historic preservation aspect, because one of the central things that we look for, you will look for, is project readiness.
Yep.
So ability to advance through the review process is gonna be a key thing in deciding whether projects can go or not. So I think that's gonna be important that people are aware, have that discussion about where projects are, how ready are they, and to have that kind of iterative discussion, because it's important to have those realistic timelines set, so that way we understand kind of whether projects are feasible. So earlier and more often we can have those discussions, the better off we'll all be.
But it would be reasonable to consider that most projects, at least by our August timeframe, would not have
No, but
village approvals.
when we would be, I think one of my point was if we're looking at projects that come in, we're thinking about timeline, a project that has, started to advance through the review process or has advanced through the review process would be considered more favorable than like a big project that hasn't started yet. Because, especially if they need multiple approvals.
Yeah, so this brings up this August 2nd deadline again. I mean, at this point, there is only one HR meeting and the agenda is already set for that meeting. I mean, it's really just we're asking people to move mountains that aren't movable in such a short period of time.
Sure, to clarify, you wouldn't be asking them to get HR approved by the second deadline. It'd be like, for example, if they submit a project and they're gonna, go in 2 years, like a year and a half from now, they're gonna start getting the review process. That's what we would be concerned.
It's more for the timeline.
It's more for the time, only the purposes of the timeline, not that they have to go.
Yeah, they just wouldn't at this point even have time to.
No, of course not.
Yeah, no, but I also think there's an element too of like, is your proposed project even permitted under the zoning? Would you have to go for, planned development district, because that's gonna take a good chunk of time, so just keeping that in mind as well.
Or would you need a use variance?
Or would you need a variance, right?
Yes, that's what we're looking for.
Hello. My name is Todd Poole, and I'm Managing Principal of Forward Planning. We're land use economists, and we perform economic and real estate analysis for public and private sector clients. We're also working on a number of these, and I emphasize this because in your sheets, you have incorrect data on about 4 pages. Because in putting this together, we absolutely mixed up, not this page, but we mixed up another community with your community. But I have on this screen the correct data. So disregard, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. So starting off demographic snapshots, and this page is correct in your handout. Roughly 10% of the population households, actually a little bit less, housing units households population relative to the village. That's your study area in terms of a snapshot of that. And we have comparisons, obviously from the study area to the village to the county, and we show you these larger, in this case the county is a larger geography. Economies are regional. They're not local, they're not, your town, they're not the towns surrounding you, they're at minimum a county, and usually they're more like a metro area. That's one of the reasons that metro areas are studied in economics, is because they really contain the economy. So here's your quick snapshot. Now, again, this differs from what you have, so don't look at your page, look up there. Sorry about that. Again, we're doing kind of a relative comparison here. Well, as we went back. So we have in the study area, we're looking at households, average household size, median age, and then we have a stat looking at households below the poverty level. In the study area, which is relatively small numbers, about 133 people, 57% are living in a family household. The Census Bureau defines family households as 2 or more people who are related by blood, marriage, or some other legal construct. And then non-family household to be one person or more who have none of those connections. The household size is relatively small at below 2, which it suggests, because you do have a fair amount of non-family households, that kind of makes sense. You probably have a lot of one-person households, at best 2 people or 2-person households. It also suggests in the study area, at the very least, that even within the village, you don't have a lot of public school-age kids. Would that be fair?
That is true.
Okay, and I would also say that too. I mean, we always look at these little clues. You've got relatively high median age thresholds, right? So a lot of communities where I work, I'm looking at median ages that are, well, I'm going to continue.
Singled out over
Listen, I'll be 59 in September. So, median age is relatively high here at 52. And remember, median means half above, half below. So, half above 52, that's a population that is aging. And we asked the so what question in our field, so what? The so what is populations in the upper levels of age spend differently than younger people do, right? They don't throw around as much discretionary cash. They don't spend as much, certainly on certain retail items, right? It matters, right? And again, I work in a lot of communities all over the place. And as a community ages, their dollar being spent at retail versus CVS changes. Keeping it real. So it's something we want to pay attention to, and I'm going to bring it up in another stat as well. So, and you can also see relative to the county, I mean, that's a market difference, right? If it was only like a 3-year difference with the county median age, but that's a market difference. So you can see the difference there. All right, education and income. And this is, I think this also is correlating positively and strongly with that age, is number one, you guys are really smart. A lot of smart people that live here. 63% of the folks that we see in the study area have a bachelor's degree or higher. An estimated 54% in the village have a bachelor's degree or higher. So it's a high concentration of high educational attainment, which is good. I mean, if you're an employer, that's what you look for, right? I mean, or I should say this, if you're an employer who wants brain power, knowledge workers, that's what you look for. Also, with such a relatively high share of persons with high educational attainment, out of that group come a lot of entrepreneurs too, right? And given that you have, median age of 52, in this country, it has been true for the last 15 or 20 years, the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs are people who are 50 and over, right? And that's, studied by the Kauffman Foundation out of Kansas City, who studies nothing but entrepreneurship, and they do these annual reports. And just about every single year, the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs are people 50 and over, which makes sense. These are people who are starting second careers. They might have, jetted out of corporate America, and they're bringing their equity from their home and 401ks and all that. So that makes sense. So fertile ground here for people who want to start businesses, right? So you might want to consider that when you're thinking about funding, using your New York Forward money, maybe setting aside a pot of money for seeding some small businesses. Very high per capita income, that's extremely high. Per capita might be off. The median household income is correct at 81,000, and the median household income for the village at 76,952. Very, very high, as relative to 63,000, which nationally the median household income is between $67,000 and $70,000 right now. So you guys you're up there. And then housing, another area that we want to pay attention to. People need a place to live, of course. And all these metrics seem to jive with, the incomes and the education and the age, in the village, identified, and this is a snapshot, so, we came back next year, depending on how the housing market does, this would change, but the median home value at $366,000, in the village, $332,000, relatively high vacancy rate, right? And I think that was brought up. I have to believe that has to do with seasonality, right? This is a tourist location. I have to believe a good chunk of that housing vacancy probably relates to housing units that go vacant and get picked up, or become vacant after the season and get picked up in that number. Because vacancy rates, when we didn't drill down on this, but when we drill down on it, housing units are vacant for a lot of reasons. Some of the times it's somebody doesn't want to put it on the market, it's vacant, but they're going to repair it at some point. Sometimes it's vacant and they don't feel like putting it on the market and they're not going to repair it. It just sits there and dies a slow death. And then there's the seasonality piece. So you got elements of that, but I have to believe probably a large segment, given how affluent this community is, has to do with the tourism aspect of your village. Here's a metric, and I wanted to say, it's a metric that probably ties back into the fact that you don't have a lot of young people here. 11% of the, estimated 11% of the households are paying a gross rent that is at least 50% or greater of their household incomes, right? So HUD considers households housing cost burdens if they're paying more than 30% of their household income towards rent or mortgage. You've got 11 out of 100 households who are paying greater than 50%. And probably you have to believe those are folks who might be service workers who may be supplying their labor locally or in the local area. But I can tell you, it's 14% in the village. So that's high. It's 20% in the county. So what that tells me is you've got an area that clearly is a tourism draw. And in tourism areas, what do you need? You need service workers to operate the retail places and the entertainment places and all that. They don't make a lot of money, right? But they still got to get to work, and they should be getting to work somewhat close by. However, we know that's not the case because, I'll get to it in a second. This is the employment, just a quick snapshot on this side is employment, and on this side we're looking at a chart looking at study area population, area households, and study area housing units in the gray. But the takeaway here is everything is it had declined and it's really flat right now. It's kind of holding steady. All right, and so nothing really to discuss there, and it'll probably continue to hold steady as it's projected out to 2028. The takeaway on this side is we're looking at jobs, and actually it should say village, not township. Primary jobs, what's that? A primary job defined by the Census Bureau is where someone can have two jobs, right? Some people have two jobs. It's the job that pays them the most money. That's a primary job. So if I've got a full-time job and a part-time job, my full-time job is my primary job. What jumps out here is you get a lot of healthcare jobs created here, right? Back in right around 2010, 2011, 2012. Does that seem about right? That time frame?
It'd be interesting to see where those numbers are coming from.
Yeah.
The hospital has been here for 100 years and has maintained pretty steady.
So the 2879 is the number we're pulling from on the map, which is this, the way that the on the map numbers work is they're tied in with unemployment insurance offices for every state. And so they're able to track anybody, all the workers who have unemployment insurance numbers, anybody who works for an employer gets one, and they're able to track employment metric. We'll double check on this, but they're estimated that right around that period of time, a number of healthcare workers came into this area.
Is that when font?
That's the.
Yeah, but they still report on their own EIN, it's not part, you can't
So it
attribute it to a network integration, because they
Mhm.
still have their own.
Yeah.
Did a major employer come in around that time?
No, I think the earlier numbers, it might be a reporting error, actually, so like a different code.
Okay. All right, we'll check in on that then. I mean, we thought that might have been an anomaly, but we have no way to check that it
No, but I
is.
think Cindy's right, I mean, I think that historically, the village has reported about 3,500 people working for the medical center, so if you're below that.
Right, well, that's, here's healthcare social assistance for the village, for the village, roughly almost 70% of your workers are found in the healthcare industry. It's 81% numbers, obviously, it's a high percentage, but it's based on a small number of people, because in the study area, it includes this building, and some other small governmental entities. But really, healthcare is the big story in terms of employment, and then you've got, roughly 6%, 6% concentrated in retail trade, no surprise with the Baseball Hall of Fame and all the stores, and accommodation and food services, and everything else is relatively small.
Nonprofits.
What's that?
Nonprofit museums and.
Museums would definitely get probably split up in retail, well.
Arts and entertainment, I would guess.
Yeah, arts and entertainment, right, so they would get split up in there.
And just out of curiosity, I know that the schools are not in the study area, but why wouldn't they be showing for educational services? Under the village?
In the village, yeah.
Yeah, that's just, they weren't picked up in the data set that we're using. Yeah, we didn't leave that out purpose if they didn't get picked up for whatever reason. So incomes and wealth, again, this is more the same. On the left, it's an income and wealth, looking at median household income. The study area is in blue, the village is in that kind of pinkish color in the middle, and then the county. And as you can see, obviously, in all the measures of income and wealth, both the village and the study area are quite high, and certainly relative to the county. So, and this translates into really high spending power. This black dotted line represents the U.S. average spending potential, and for different categories: retail goods, housing, which would be rent, mortgage, groceries, dining out, entertainment, recreation, apparel, and services. So you can see that the village generally, and the study area in particular, are just well above spending potential thresholds. Then add to that everybody that's coming in to visit. So there's a lot of money sloshing around here. The question is, is everybody satisfied with all the things you have to spend on here? Are there different types of restaurants or different types of retail amenities that you might find more attractive to be here? So this is where I was going to come before when I was talking about workers who are here, or a lot of workers in the area, in the village, and probably even at the hospital, who work locally, but commute an awfully long way, right? So this big circle there, green, represents those employed, to say village, not selection area, those employed in the village, but living outside the village. So a lot of folks. And then this green circle is those who live in the village but are employed outside of it, a much smaller subset. And then a really small subset is kind of the where they intersect. And you got employed and live in the village, 271 people. So relatively few people both live and work here. The majority of people who work here are traveling out. And how far are they traveling from? Well, slightly more than half are traveling from no more than 10 miles.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I see this as 2020 data. Have you done any studies to look at the remote aspect? Like federal government is still doing 4-day weeks and remoting and
Right.
Are you able to analyze that part? I'm a remote worker now.
Oh, yeah, no, we're unfortunately, well, two things. One, we're not, because this is a small, relatively small area to get that kind of data. Two, we're showing you the latest data available, because there's always like a 2-year lag when this is released. So granted, this is, pulling, I mean, because this is 2020, actually, this isn't really picking up everything, dealing with COVID. Like, this is 2021.
I just wasn't, with your expertise, have you done any other studies where you could be like, yeah, this is what we're gonna see here coming up in the next 2 years?
Yeah, but here, here's what I'll tell you though, is think about the jobs we've been talking about. Healthcare, and certainly when you're in the village, retail, those aren't remote jobs. Those are like, you gotta be here to do those jobs.
Well, healthcare administrative support is all remote, right?
Administrative, but like, all those workers, those aren't all administrative workers. I mean, a lot of those are like hands-on, right?
Yeah, that's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of those?
I mean, I don't know off the top of my
Okay.
head, but, significant, and all of IT's gone, finance is gone.
Right.
So all you have to do is look at the parking lot.
That's true. Right, but as you said, I mean, we're talking about, a few thousand people who are working in healthcare. Percentage-wise, they couldn't, the majority of them still have to physically show up.
I think that the downtown, the downtown profile assessment, as Todd says, takes a snapshot of the most current data available.
Right.
But what it also does is it takes contemporary data based on your observations of downtown, so you can capture remote work, you can capture the changing COVID dynamics in the narrative section.
Right.
And you can set that as a context for the projects that come forward and for future planning efforts too.
Right, yeah, I tell you what, this is, with COVID, and given the timeline or the time data sets that we're able to pull, it's really messed with the work that we do, because, if you look pre-COVID, now we can start looking at what's happening now, but those 2 to 3 years, they're messed up data points, right? They really are, and so, yeah, some of this is hard to tease out, but having said all of that, because this area, the type of industry and employment, which is accommodation, food services, retail, and this larger piece of healthcare, the vast majority, it's not even a doubt, the vast majority have to physically be there to do that. If this, if we were in Silicon Valley, yeah, okay, a lot of people are commuting. If you were in Austin, a lot of people are commuting. Here, when I say commuting, I mean telecommuting. Here, you still got the majority of people who are showing up. And so, all this is really telling us as analysts is that you got a relatively high share of people who are making some long-term, long-distance commutes, which suggests there probably isn't enough workforce housing in the area. And it doesn't, let me tell you, it doesn't mean it has to be built in a village, but somewhere closer to the village such that people can access their jobs, pay less in transportation costs, probably, be more productive because you're not on the road as long. And as a village that definitely relies on these type of workers, you want to see, you probably want to partner with the county and with outside communities to see what can be done to make that happen. Takeaways, so really quickly, workforce housing, that's a big one for me. And, I got a chance to walk the area about a month ago, and I'll ask you this question, did the sun ever shine here? Because the last time I was here, it was raining, but I was also getting that nice Canada smoke. I was gasping for air. But in walking around, you do have some opportunity for select redevelopment. All right, not a lot, but you do. And I would never in a million years suggest you do anything that messes with the character of this community, because that's part of the brand. But I think you can do some things here that create more space for workforce housing, and you never mess with the aesthetic of the community. So that's one thing that we want to take a closer look at. So thank you.
do a tech swap.
And that updated snapshot will be replaced or replace some of the sheets that you already have.
Have it tomorrow.
Thank you for that, that was wonderful information. You're welcome. Awesome to see that stuff, so thank you.
All right, I'll just check together.
While I'm standing, water anybody?
Cookies?
Cookies, water? That's the cookie ground. All right, so we talked a little bit that all of this information was leading into the visioning process today, so we're going to have a little bit of a group exercise on your cookies. And talk, kind of get some ideas, tease them out, make it a bit more interactive at this point, so that we hear your ideas as well. And Adriana will help navigate the writing of these ideas. There we go, cookies and movement. So from the New York Forward application, there was a vision statement that was included. In your packet, it's on the screen. This is kind of a starting point. We want to make sure that this is now flushed out with the committee, flushed out with the public, and built upon, so that we're kind of expanding that to include all of our kind of key takeaways, key ideas that are coming from the planning process, so that we have kind of a more robust vision statement moving forward for our DRI, or excuse me, New York Forward. And so Village of Cooperstown is a small town community with a national tourism draw that will build on prior dynamic downtown improvements to create connections from Main Street to Scenic Lake Otsego, attract more year-round business activity, revitalize historic facades, enhance infrastructure to improve commercial and residential quality, ensure walkability and accessibility, and assist in the creation of downtown apartment-style housing. That is a lot. It was a great vision statement that was included in that application, and it does touch on a lot of what we did talk about already. Some of the workforce housing, and it was kind of teased into that with the apartment-style housing. So what is missing from your perspective? What do we want to add to this? How do we want to, is there any ideas from what you've heard today that when you read this resonates that's missing?
I think recognition of technology and where it's going. I don't know how to incorporate that in here, but I do know from a delivery standpoint, you're going to start seeing UAV deliveries. That's coming. So I think that somehow needs to be incorporated because it's moving faster than humans.
We're gonna have, I'm sorry, we've got a bunch of things to cover, and this is kind of a working meeting, and we're really gonna have time at the end.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said it was interactive, right?
Oh, sorry, we write it down.
That's right. She was looking at us, thank you.
Not intended to be insulting, but we will get your idea too, but.
So one of the things that came up, Don was talking, it would be nice to put in there something about encouraging entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Because I agree with what Don's saying, not just within the village, but outside the village, that there's a big spur there. We can officially acknowledge that.
It could go right in after more year-round business activity, encourage entrepreneurship. I think it's a great addendum right there.
Let me add this piece too, and we see this in communities like this. Think about the issue of passing on the succession, right? A lot of your businesses are owned by what? First generation or second generation, and sometimes it doesn't continue. Right? right? Somebody wants to cash out, and there's no one standing in the wings wanting to take it. One of the things you might want to do is survey your business owners to find out who among them might be looking in the next 5 years to, get out of that business, and then think about who might take over for them if you want to preserve that business.
I also think we need to capture something about drawing. We just heard about the older generation. We have to capture bringing in young professionals and making it enticing and affordable. I can just speak from the school. We lose people in the 5 to 8 year range, and they're moving to more exciting areas that have more interesting activities for young professionals. They're moving to places that have affordable housing, and they're looking for communities with young families to build a family. And that's like that 5 to 8 year, 26 to 32, and they're getting married and they're can't afford a house. So.
You don't have to solve it all today, Audrey.
Yeah, I'm like, where can that fit? It's gonna be one really long run on.
Right. Take out the 5 to 8 year range, it's just attract younger families.
It's young professionals,
young families, which means, we talked at the last meeting, childcare.
Yeah, we actually do have a slide, sorry.
There is apartment style housing, but you're hitting on another point of is affordable housing as well.
Yeah, this was kind of our a summary of what we talked about last time too. So, and that's in your packet. So if you guys, want to take a look at that too while we're talking, I think that is a helpful little recap. Do you want to jump to the goals?
Yeah. So along those same lines is starting to develop some draft goals for the strategic investment plan. So this is summarized from your downtown revitalization plan, the 2016 plan. So encouraging development of apartment style housing, ensure greater business diversity for year-round shopping, further enhance the view shed from Main Street to Otsego Lake, link existing neighborhoods, open space and recreational areas, make the village hall a community anchor, and explore the feasibility of mixed-use development in the vicinity of the Old Day Field. These are summarized, they're much broader in those plans, but that's kind of the high level goals that came from that. I think there were some key takeaways that we heard today that might be expanded into additional goals for our study area.
One thing that, a couple pieces of context for the goals is to think of it and how, if the New York Forward program will help us achieve X, Y, Z, X for your goals, right?
Goal, strategy, and then
So
how you
like,
can.
exactly, so in the context of, think about like what you want your board to bring to the village, you want to expect it to catalyze and break that into the goals. And the reason I say that is because they will help you inform your review criteria that you use to select the slate of projects for that go to the state eventually. So I think that it's important to have that context to focus on the program.
I think that greater business diversity kind of can pull on some of that, like attracting younger families or some of that more the regional data that we were getting today, drawing people, a more diverse array of people kind of on, kind of flatten those, that tourism peak that happens a little bit, or at least even it out a little bit.
Yeah, and you will get young professionals, because going back to the telecommuting and working with technology, you can work anywhere now, right? Yes, people are choosing to go to Austin and Miami, but those places are becoming unaffordable as we speak, because everybody's going there, right? It's Jimmy Bear who said they don't go there anymore because it's too crowded. But they're going to be coming to places like here, right? Because it has that quaint lifestyle, and it has the walkability, and it can still telecommute, which, by the way, also means that you're going to want to have a third place for them to do that, right? Not everybody's working at their kitchen table or in their home office. A lot of these professionals do want to leave the home, but just walk down the street to something that's, comfortable, and perhaps with like-minded people who are doing that. So when I think in terms of those spaces.
I guess I certainly agree with everybody that housing, affordable housing is a problem for the village. But I don't know how we solve that problem inside of the footprint of this particular area. Like, it seems to me like most of the I'd say the majority of the upper floors are utilized as apartments already. So I don't see a big opportunity to fix housing inside this footprint. I think it's kind of, it has to be a conversation outside of this New York Forward process. So I think if we spend a lot of time on it, we can't fix it inside the footprint of that area. It's just my opinion.
And we've also kind of surveyed our Main Street and the second and third floors. And we know that we have, certain buildings, would it be apartments that I'd want to live in? Not necessarily, but they are very functional apartments because these are for our service workers who go and wash dishes, get paid in cash, go back, pay their rent in cash. Those are incredibly viable apartments that we have. And I would hate to see them start to upscale too much. And then we've essentially lost our service worker housing that is available right now.
So on the flip side, just making sure that they, doesn't necessarily have to be upscale, but making sure they are quality, have windows that are providing energy efficiency. And so some of those enhancements that not necessarily, while they are improvements and they do tend to increase costs, it does provide a quality of life. So it's kind of a balance of making sure that that's met too.
And I want to read one point. I agree with Ken that it's challenging in light of the built environment here to kind of focus on housing singularly, but there is a distinct connection between Main Street and the commercial core and the surrounding village. So there's a benefit of calling out housing as a key element to downtown revitalization. So that way projects that are outside of the area and that are seeking state investment or seeking additional investment from the private sector can point to the New York Forward SIP as a indicator that the village really does need more housing. So we call it vertical integration throughout the plans.
We have a little bit on the business diversity. I like the discussion we had on the entrepreneur or the startups, the seeding new businesses as part of, and how does that resonate with the LPC as well? Does it expand business diversity? Is it its own goal? Is it?
One of the things I'm confused about is, and I don't know how it all ties in. I'm not saying, if you know this place, Rock City in Little Falls, that was built as this modern shared workspace. Aesthetically, we really fit into the project area, but the idea of a shared workspace that is modern, village has high-speed internet, bring people to Main Street or Main Street environment who are working all day. It doesn't have to be retail, they're there all day. How does one encourage a current building owner to say, here's an opportunity we think would be served by this information? You have the building, have you thought about converting it to a different, I'm not sure how, when you have kind of a present landlord structure, how you convince them to meet the needs that they feel perceived.
Yeah, they do. So here's the way that you do it is you gotta show them dollars and cents. And, having worked in the public sector for a dozen years doing economic development and business loans, all that, you wanna say, let's talk about your business now. You're making you're selling $300 a foot annually in terms of sales. Then we think of, okay, what if this, were some kind of WeWork type space, a little coffee shop in it, and you have the ability to rent out desk and conference rooms, right? Then we start doing the math on that. That's the only way that you're going to be able to convince building property owners, really just show the numbers side by side. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I almost wonder, to your point, Nicole, if this if ensuring greatest business diversity, I mean, it feels like we're kind of talking about like period, not necessarily only for shopping or retail, but bring your interesting business, bring your co-working space, bring your, whatever else. I know that there was discussion in the downtown plan of recreational gear rentals and stuff like that. So, how does that like make sense with all of you?
One of the things that was interesting that years ago we brought in, like a Main Street economist. She talked about businesses that wouldn't depend on tourism, but we kind of get that as a gravy, but their real business is outward. And to some degree, we've seen that in new businesses like the distilleries, beverage exchange, they make money during tourist season, but I assume their money is in distribution and increasing that brand awareness. I have no idea how the guitar shop is doing, but the guitar shop clearly has outside of just Main Street traffic. And even certain businesses that rely on Main Street traffic, like Moby Books and certainly during the pandemic, in terms of esports, they developed an outside of the village business while still maintaining it inside. Vicky's Place is another example. How do we recruit those type of businesses that could benefit from being here?
I think just one eligible project type is branding and marketing. So we're very fortunate to have destination marketing.
Yeah.
They save our taxpayers thousands of dollars each year. But what I would suggest though is that their marketing is focused on heads and beds, but there's an opportunity for more local marketing efforts to recruit people here. So I point to the City of Amsterdam, a very successful branding and marketing campaign called Advanced Amsterdam. They've actually gone through two separate funding sources. They went through DRI money and they're continuing it with National Grid, and they're still continuing because it's been so successful. So I think the mayor's point is also good.
Former mayor.
I'm always like, as a politics, I'm all starts balls with honorifics.
What I was gonna say is that destination marketing for Otsego County has actually morphed a little bit. They really always were heads and beds because obviously they got their funding stream from the bed tax revenue. But they've actually launched, they had a program last fall at the Otisada where they kind of launched their revisioning, and it's really supporting existing businesses here and not solely that heads and beds anymore. So that's really beneficial to our community and is a good work partner for us.
Something else to think about, based on some of the statistics that we saw with a slightly older population compared to other areas of the country and state, and also the low density. You've got less than 2 people per house, and then we also look at sort of the lack of affordable homes. The reality is that I think a lot of the homes that are owned by older people where there's maybe only one person in a house, if they had another option, more like, not necessarily some type of version of senior housing. I know that it's a lot to take care of a house, and sometimes they're just in it because there isn't another place to go, and that would also be a great segue for like younger families to come in. Instead of buying a fully renovated fancy house for an expensive price tag, some of the houses that are smaller, that are good starter homes, happen to be occupied by maybe people who would be happier with a different option. And so looking at some type of senior housing, because I know that Cooper Lane isn't necessarily like senior housing, but I know that a lot of older people, when they sell their house, that's where they go. And that building seems to always be full. And so, some type of senior housing may help attract younger families and sort of push some of that density up. It would be nice to see, more than 1.6 people.
1.87, I'm not counting.
That's like a head and arm.
Right, exactly.
It may be worth thinking about assigning homework in this regard, to this end.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This is something that we're gonna work with the public at the public workshop as well. So it's something that, it's a good starting point as we kind of continue this conversation. But I think if everyone would think about the kind of the robust goals, as Danny mentioned, the next step from goals is like, how do you achieve it? What are the action items? Encouraging co-working space, encouraging kind of like the ability to create micro enterprise businesses. So some of those pieces are the next step, but we need to think about what the higher goal is for our study area, and then we can drill down into how do we achieve those items. And then we look at the projects and do those projects achieve those
And again, this think very wide, this isn't anything that we think would improve the village that can be addressed in some way through the airport program. So in this target area, anything that you feel is lacking or could be improved, and then, we can hunt it down from there, but, any ideas are on the table.
And in your packet, as Adriana mentioned, is the SWOT analysis that we did it together. So you might even want to think about that in the sense of what are those strengths and how do we build on those? What are those weaknesses and how do we overcome them from a goal perspective? Opportunities can be turned into a goal as well. So kind of think very broadly when you look at those and think of ways that we can start to incorporate those into our strategic plan. I think those are the key pieces.
I think so. Next slide is
So
just the next steps.
So public open house is coming very, very quickly. One of the things that popped into my head as part of this process, we do have a very long time period from 12 to 8. And we would like to have LPC representation at the workshop. So it might be good to do a sign up, like a kind of an internal sign up so that we know who's gonna be attending and kind of like slots of time. You don't feel that you have to be there for the whole 8 hours, but you get a taste of what the community is saying as well. So we can circulate that as also part of the homework assignment, at least sign up as part of that process. We're working on the downtown profile and assessment, so that's building towards this information that's coming forward in the August meeting. You'll have that. The call for projects is ongoing. We'll make sure that we introduce the webinar. That's going to be a next big step. All of you are invited to attend the webinar as well. If you want to participate, we'll make sure that you have that information so that you can also share it with individuals. It will be recorded, and we can also put that on the website too. And then our next LPC meeting is August 23rd. So those are, it's coming quickly. July will be a busy month. So with that, we do have public comment period. So following our kind of village rules, we'd just love to hear name, limited to about 3 minutes is what we, one at a time, everybody be courteous, and we'd love to hear your ideas. It can be on any of the topics we've discussed tonight. If you have questions of things that are coming forward, we're happy to answer them. But we definitely want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear anyone. And
I just wanted to take a look, because it's in my head, since you guys are talking about, we're talking about, the kinds of businesses to attract. To not discount, not just the ones who are retail or manufacturing products, but also like Paper Kite is a fabulous addition to the village. They have a much broader outreach, or clientele than just if we just counteract Sealy County. And most importantly is that they have people who are downtown and they are shopping and they are eating and they are using the services like the post office and the coffee shop and Bruce Hall and things like that. So we want employers who have employees who will frequent Main Street. And that's why I always harp on the get people downtown and get people into the village and get businesses that will speak to people who want to be here year-round. It drives me nuts to walk by all of the empty second homes or Airbnb houses, and a number of the apartments on Main Street are used as Airbnb. And so those are not service worker housing, they're Airbnb.
Which is, by the way, I'll point that out, that's happening nationally, it's a phenomenon, that Airbnbs are crowding out what would otherwise go to workers.
Exactly, and so I think that's something we have to be very mindful of, is that It may, I don't know if they're, you know, above board with the village, but I do know that there was everything. So that's an issue. With respect to the farmer's market, we would love to be a source for an open house and a spot for an open house. We just need scheduling. The summer is our busy months and we have a limited footprint. Yeah, I
And
can.
make sure, first for the record, name.
I'm sorry, Ellen Vogt, I'm on the list, but I live at 28 Elm Street. We have limited space at the farmer's market. You will get more people on a Saturday, but we just need to know, and that Saturday, there's so just contact me, just go to who's on farmer's market, this call, and I can go through the schedule and we can find a date that's appropriate. So, because it's, you know, it directly affects us, we're thrilled that this is going forward, but, we want to help.
Great, thank you. I think I saw your hand.
Yes, I'm Patty McLeish, I'm with the League of Women Voters, it's over, but I do have one, I have one question about the upcoming meeting on July 11th. I think the sense in the village is that this is a project for villagers, but I get the sense that you want people from all the surrounding areas to come and speak, but I don't hear that in, the site is on the village website. And I'm really happy to put it into our calendar so people know that this is an event, but they don't. I want to make sure you want to hear from people who know their
Yeah, I personally, I would say absolutely. It is a revitalization of this study area, but we're seeking input from what the needs of the community are. And the community doesn't necessarily all reside in that study area. So by all means, you know, if you're able to share, that would be wonderful. To be able to get that input into what the needs of this area is. So yes, it is broader than those that live in that area.
I'm not sure that that's the message that's going out.
Yeah.
If you don't think about that.
Okay.
Attention.
So we can be careful to kind of cater to a larger messaging. Anything else? Anything else you have, or are you good?
Oh, no, you're talking,
Yeah.
I thought. No, I'm fine.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone? We also have the open call project forms here, so if there's anybody here that would like one, there are additional ones here that can be shared, or the LPC can share.
Just make one more call. If anyone wants to learn more about the program, we have about 180-page public-facing guidance describing every detail of the program. It's a snooze fest, but if you want to see soup to nuts of how the New York Forward program works, it's there. You can look at all the award winning, you know, all the strategic investment plans on the Department of State website as well. So again, you know, you can see the finished product and all the other kind of communities. They have the contact information from project sponsors. If you're curious about how the community experience PRI New York Forward is doing better than as well.
I do have a question about the project. Is there an established matching fund percentage? Like, you know, is 20%, I mean, is it a 50%?
Sure,
So, project?
The only established, required matches for the small project fund in which project sponsor has to have 25% of matching funds. ESD requires a 10% equity stake for their project, but the LPC, it's up to the LPC as to whether or not they want to set a match and how much. And that'll happen at LPC 3.
I had a question about what gets on the website after the first meeting. I was talking to people in the community, and there's others go to this website to see the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint wasn't up there, so I just ended up scanning it and emailing it to people. I don't know if that changed or I didn't find it, but this is already public.
That's right. So we are working, the village has a webmaster, we are working very closely with him, third party.
Okay.
And so hopefully it'll happen much faster now that we've had
Okay.
all of these connections and all the materials shared.
Okay.
So all of this will be shared with him tomorrow, and we'll strongly
Okay,
encourage them.
all right, good, all right.
And the first PowerPoint that will be up there as well, because that could have gone up anytime, it will be up there.
He does have it.
He has it now, and it's
He's
up
had it.
there now. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, cookies and water at closing. Thank you very much.